I also have Ested Herndon coming on. So, at 1.
As his campaign manager, Susie Wiles will become his chief of staff. He also pledged to crack down on illegal immigration immediately. Rachel Scott is in West Palm Beach. Good morning, Rachel.
George, good morning to you. Donald Trump making his first major decision as president-elect, selecting Susie Wiles to become his chief of staff. She's a longtime Republican advisor that has been quietly working on his campaign for 4 years, but it's hard to find anyone who was more critical to the success of his third bid for the White House than Susie Wiles. This morning, Donald Trump is hitting the ground running for his second term, officially announcing Susie Wiles, his campaign co-chair, as his White House chief of staff.
Susie likes to stay sort of in the back, let me tell you. The ice baby, we call her the ice baby.
Wiles will be the first female White House chief of staff in U.S. history. Trump praising her as tough, smart, innovative, and universally admired and respected. Wiles, the daughter of NFL player and sportscaster Pat Summerall, has been a powerful GOP advisor for years, credited with helping getting Florida Republicans like Senator Rick Scott and Governor Ron DeSantis elected in 2018. DeSantis fired her, and she would later go on to lead Trump's campaign to defeat him in the primary. Wiles is known for running a tight ship, staying out of the spotlight, striking a balance of letting Trump be Trump, but steering the campaign back to focus on the issues: economy, inflation, and immigration. Trump's team already moving quickly to execute his day one priority, a crackdown on illegal immigration, focusing on how to immediately launch Trump's key campaign pledge: mass deportations of the estimated 12 million undocumented immigrants. According to some experts, mass deportations could cost an estimated $88 billion a year and send inflation spiking as millions of workers are removed from the workforce. But Trump dismissing any cost concerns, saying there's no choice, adding in an interview, "They're not staying here. There is no price tag." At the White House, President Biden pledging a smooth transition.
On January 20th, we'll have a peaceful transfer of power here in America.
After Democrats crushing defeat across the country, Biden urging supporters to accept the results and move forward.
We accept the choice the country made. I've said many times, you can't love your country.
I think it's kind of funny that they're like, we're going to do a peaceful transfer of power. It's like, did anyone even question that? Did anyone ever genuinely, seriously think that there was going to be like a lib January 6th? Now, I am seeing a lot of fucking Twitter and TikTok posts that make me feel like maybe there could be one. And I think that would be pretty funny, probably. But I do find it strange that he's like, we're going to do a peaceful transfer of power to the fascists. It's something that I've been thinking about quite a bit. Okay? It's something that I've been thinking about quite a bit. What do I mean? It's like the Supreme Court of the United States, which is firmly committed to preserving Donald Trump's safety, security, and his mania, has given the office of the presidency extreme levels of security from prosecution. They did this decision in an effort to shield Trump from any kind of legal scrutiny, a second line of defense, another hurdle that inevitably the Supreme Court will either have to defend or argue in favor of, by giving him the opportunity to say, hey, look, this was a presidential act. Okay? And what's really interesting about this is that this gives Brandon carte blanche in abusing that power, that awesome power that the Supreme Court has afforded to the office of the presidency. However, I believe that the Supreme Court of the United States knows that the Democrats would never do that. Trump, on the other hand, will guarantee do that. Okay? Guaranteed. He will absolutely use this newfound, unimaginable level of freedom that he has from legal prosecution, criminal prosecution, to his advantage. Democrats never fight. Okay? They don't. They don't ever offer up a fight, and Republicans know that, so they do not care.
Only when you win.
The White House insisting the president does not regret his decision to step aside or that he did it so late in the campaign. The president offering only praise for his vice president.
She gave her whole heart and effort, and she and her entire team should be proud of the campaign they ran.
And of course, President-elect Donald Trump expected to travel to Washington to meet with President Biden at the White House in the coming days. As President-elect Donald Trump, of course, also entitled to receive classified intelligence briefings. And this morning, we are told that as part of this agreement to accept this role as chief of staff, Susie Wiles wanted to make certain that she could still play the role of gatekeeper, keeping some oversight over who has control or who is going into the Oval Office, trying to avoid some of the chaos that we saw in the first administration, George.
And Rachel, we're seeing a group of Democratic governors mobilize. They're saying they're trying to Trump-proof their states.
Yeah. Donald Trump has not been sworn in yet into office, but already you have a handful of Democratic governors that are really trying to brace for any potential policies of a Trump administration. So California Governor Gavin Newsom, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker saying they are ready to call lawmakers back into a special session, trying to safeguard any type of curtail against reproductive rights, gun reform, and also any environmental regulations, George.
In an address to the nation yesterday, President.
Also, here's Nancy Pelosi blasting Brandon on New York Times. Had the president gotten out sooner, there may have been other candidates in the race, Ms. Pelosi said. But this is also blasting Kamala, too, by the way. And she's right. Had the president gotten out sooner, there may have been other candidates in the race, Ms. Pelosi said during an interview with Lulu Garcia-Navarro, the host of the interview, a Times podcast she added during the interview, which will be published in full on Saturday. The anticipation was that if the president were to step aside, that there would be an open primary. How about the primary? Why did they not even allow a primary to take place? Because they were worried about a 2016 style primary where a progressive voice would probably do fairly well, and it would actually hurt Biden in the general. It would openly show in full display that Biden had lost his step. Okay? And that's the reason why the Democratic Party did not want to have a real primary at all. That's why the only people running against Biden was like fucking Dean Phillips, Uncle Cenk, and Marianne Williamson. Ms. Pelosi went on, and as I say, Kamala may have. I think she would have done well in that and been stronger going forward, but we don't know that. That didn't happen. We live with what happened. And because the president endorsed Kamala Harris immediately, that really made it almost impossible to have a primary at the time. If it had been much earlier, it would have been different. I think that the Democratic Party should not have been so cowardly and allowed Biden, a person who was like very clearly mentally deficient for the role, to continue out his selfish desires of going forward with the second term. The Democratic Party did not have to. The Democratic Party also didn't do anything about Biden picking Kamala Harris, originally, even though she was one of the weakest candidates in the 2019 primary. Okay? She didn't even make it to 2020. The Democratic Party allowed Biden to choose her deliberately for openly identitarian reasons that he demonstrated. He was like, oh, I want a black woman, Jack. It was like one of the silliest things I've ever heard. Like, Kamala Harris had the background to be vice president. That much is clear to me. I mean, she'd played a role. It's just that she was from California. Okay. It's not a state that is a must-win state, right? It's already a lock. And I think that the reason why she chose Kamala Harris was specifically because you could back pocket her. It would be a contingency plan for anyone that wants to get Biden out of the race at any point when he was running for office again. Okay? And no, I will not be listening to Tim Walz speaking because I will not be listening to Tim Walz speaking now. I'll listen to different takes. I'll listen to his speech in a second because right now I'm going to be talking to Ested Herndon of the New York Times. Okay? At 1. Anyway. Now, there's of course in this New York Times article, there's of course a whole litany of silly things that she said as well. She took issue with the comments this week from Senator Bernie Sanders, the independent progressive from Vermont, who suggested Ms. Harris's defeat had come in parts because the Democrats were too focused on identity politics at the expense of economic concerns. Bernie Sanders has not won, Ms. Pelosi said. With all due respect, and I have a great deal of respect for him, for what he stands for, but I don't respect him saying that the Democratic Party has abandoned the working class families. She suggested that cultural issues were more to blame for Democrats' losses among the working class. Guns, gods, and gays. That's the way they say it, she said. Guns, that's an issue. Gays, that's an issue. And now they're making the trans issue such an important issue in their priorities. And in certain communities, what they call God, what we call a woman's right to choose. First of all, this is a false interpretation of what Bernie Sanders' message was as well. Bernie Sanders didn't say drop the identity politics. Bernie Sanders said focus on universality in your message. Focus on social safety net expansions. Focus on direct policy prescriptions to the harm that people are experiencing. There has never been a moment where Bernie Sanders, at least since 2016, has been like anti-trans or anti-black or any number of different things that people smeared him as. Cynically, as a matter of fact, Bernie's method is to not unnecessarily hyper-target specific marginalized populations. That's it. And that is a successful strategy, in my opinion. Okay? You do not have to compromise with the right. You do not have to compromise or write out trans people from the coalition. That is ridiculous. At the end of the day, the things that Bernie Sanders was advocating for would have disproportionately helped some of the poorest people in all of the different demographics. Okay? Trans people or black people are not magical, mystical beings that are not experiencing the shock of material shortcomings. Okay? They are not sheltered from not having access to health care. They are not sheltered from the impact of the housing market. Okay? But the issue was when Bernie communicated a universal message, they tried to cynically turn it into, oh, he's just saying all lives matter. That's what he's doing. He's all lives mattering the situation. It's like, no, dog. It's so fucking stupid. And there's no better representation of this, like, back and forth within the establishment of the Democratic Party than Jim Clyburn coming out and saying Bernie is like racist, alluding to the fact that Bernie is racist and that Joe Biden is not. Of course, why was Jim Clyburn saying that? Well, one, because he was in the tank for Biden, but two, it's because Bernie Sanders had always been uncompromising in his battle to give every single American health care, okay? Free health care. Jim Clyburn, on the other hand, had different opinions on that issue. Despite being a representative of one of the poorest districts in the country, okay, Jim Clyburn was never an advocate for expanding Medicare. Okay? He was not. His constituents would have benefited greatly from Jim Clyburn's expansion